Welcome to the layer-by-layer overview of Psalm 118. A way to remember this psalm is with the phrase, "From a tight place to thanksgiving." The Israelite assembly used these words to celebrate a day of deliverance when they had first expected to lose a battle, but against all expectations, God helped them win. This psalm is all about thanksgiving, thanking God for his loyalty to his covenant people, especially one time when he saved a leader from great distress. The psalm is divided into two main sections, testimony and celebration, framed by an opening and closing chorus. The testimony transitions into celebration with a gate ceremony, which is the highest emotional point of the psalm. As we might expect, the Thanksgiving chorus sections are full of thanksgiving. The testimony section is confident, but it describes a time of great distress. And the celebration section adds expectant joy to the thanksgiving. To understand this psalm, we need to know about what happened in ancient Israel after they won important battles. The winners would go to Jerusalem to give thanks. We read an example in 2 Chronicles 20. King Jehoshaphat is in great distress. He cries out to the Lord, and the Lord answers, and the king wins the battle. The king responds properly by coming to Jerusalem with harps and lyres and trumpets to the house of the Lord, where he performs a thanksgiving ceremony. Putting together what we learn from different texts, we see that the most important part of the ceremony was a temple ritual. This ritual would include 4 actions. First, gathering a crowd of Israelites who joined the victor to agree with his testimony of winning the battle and celebrate along with him. Entering through the temple gates in a ceremony. Repeating the Thanksgiving chorus, "Give thanks to the Lord because he is good, because his loyalty is forever." And, most importantly, the 4th action is offering a thanksgiving sacrifice. There is also a very important word in this psalm, which appears in the opening and closing choruses that frame the poem: loyalty. This word is also translated as love or loving kindness by other translations. This is the Hebrew word chesed, which refers to a person's commitment to do what is required in a relationship. In Psalm 118, that relationship is the covenant between the Lord and Israel. As Israel's God, the Lord commits to protect them and rescue them from danger. Every time we hear, "because his loyalty is forever," it means that his faithful commitment to his covenant with Israel is forever, even if Israel is unfaithful. See our Poetic Features video for just how important this word is. We will start with the Thanksgiving chorus. The psalm starts with a crowd outside the temple gates. The gathered people include priests, people, probably citizens and soldiers, and a military leader who is likely a king. The king has won an amazing victory and has come to Jerusalem to give thanks. The opening verse became a formula for Thanksgiving ceremonies, as we read in Jeremiah 33 and Psalm 100. The first section is a multi-part chorus, perhaps one that would be used at the beginning of any Thanksgiving ceremony. It lets everyone know it is time to start giving thanks. Verse 1. "Give thanks to the Lord because he is good, because his loyalty is forever." The Hebrew word for give thanks refers to both thanksgiving and praise. Thanksgiving may be linked with particular events, but praise is more general and refers to pointing out good qualities in someone's character. This psalm is clearly about a particular time when God rescued a king from distress, so the emphasis is thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving chorus would have been sung by a chorus leader first. The leader was perhaps a temple singer or music director of some kind. The Thanksgiving chorus was originally used in the temple before giving thank offerings, a kind of sacrifice. Over time, people began to use it more widely as a call to praise in hymns. The word loyalty refers to the Lord's faithful commitment to do what the covenant requires him to do for his people. Verse 2. Let Israel say, because his loyalty is forever. The chorus leader now addresses Israel, which refers to the worshippers at the temple who represent Israel as a nation. The leader calls them to repeat the second half of the Thanksgiving chorus, because his loyalty is forever. They have begun a Thanksgiving ceremony, so they all know what comes next. They must give thanks to the Lord, because his loyalty is forever. This loyalty is the main reason for Thanksgiving. The Lord never abandons his people, but always provides for, protects, and delivers them. This repetition of what the leader says continues for 2 more rounds. Verse 3, let the house of Aaron say, because his loyalty is forever. The house of Aaron refers to the priests who are at the ceremony. Their job was to oversee Israel's worship rituals. Verse 4, let those who fear the Lord say, because his loyalty is forever. Those who fear the Lord refers here to all who are present, including both the gathered worshippers and the priests. See our exegetical issues video for a full explanation of why we interpret it this way. Verse 5. The testimony section begins with verse 5. The general chorus is over, and now the specific reason for this ceremony is explained. From the tight place, I cried out to Yah. Yah answered me with spaciousness. Yah is a short form of the fuller covenant name for God, written YHWH. We traditionally say Lord in English. The use of Yah relates this part of the ceremony to another well-known song used in worship rituals, the Song of the Sea from Exodus 15. We will see that references to the Song of the Sea are important in this psalm. The testimony section is summarized by this first verse. The psalmist was in a tight place, which is a common Hebrew metaphor that means he was in great distress. He cried out to the Lord, who replaced the tight place with spaciousness. He changed the bad situation to its opposite, moving the psalmist from distress to victory to freedom. Verse 6. The Lord is for me. I shall not fear. What can man do to me? When God changes the situation from distress to freedom, the psalmist feels extremely confident. He has experienced that the Lord is for him, on his side, fighting on his behalf. With such a mighty protector, he is no longer afraid of any enemy or threat. This describes what it means for the Lord to be his helper. Everything that once caused him to fear is reevaluated as no longer something to fear. Verse 7. The Lord is for me as my helper, and I shall look in triumph upon those who hate me. There are implications if it is true that the Lord is for the psalmist. It means that he is my helper. Here, this means a military helper or an ally. With such an ally, there is no reason to fear, and triumph is guaranteed. This verse takes the testimony about a specific event and explains what this event implies. The leader recently experienced the Lord defeating his enemies, and now he reflects on the Lord as his helper. He can be confident that God will help him, not only this one time, but also in the future. He expects to continue to defeat his enemies, who are here described as those who hate me. Verse 8. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. The leader's reflections now take the shape of a common wisdom formula. in which the psalmist compares what a normal human expects with what a person in covenant with the Lord expects. David, who wrote many psalms, found he could not trust in man because people betrayed him many times. It is possible this verse hints at those times people betrayed him, but it may also simply be stating that it is good to depend on the Lord for refuge. It is better than anything we can imagine when we compare it to depending on humans. Verse 9. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in noblemen. Saying it once was not enough to describe what this leader is feeling. This repetition is a poetic device to emphasize the emotions he feels. Trusting in the Lord is not simply better than trusting in the common man. It is better even than trusting in noblemen, who are seen as the best kind of humans. This concludes the first part of the testimony. The psalmist realizes that God was with him as his helper, and he can trust him in the future. Verse 10. In contrast to verse 9's proverb-like statement, verse 10 begins to narrate what actually happened in the past. This account is the beginning of the next subsection of the testimony. The leader describes the distress he encountered and relives some of the critical moments. All nations surrounded me. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. During this event, he learned how the Lord is a greater refuge than men. There were so many enemies, he felt as if all nations surrounded him in battle. He reenacts what he said at the time when he was hopeless, facing such great danger. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. This may be a battle cry that was common at the time, or it may be a battle cry the leader thought of on his own for this particular battle. The phrase, with the name of the Lord, uses the same wording as David's battle cry against Goliath. David, a young shepherd facing great danger, defeated the towering giant Goliath with the power of the Lord. This leader would defeat his enemies in the same way. Verse 11. They surrounded me. Indeed, they surrounded me. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. Whenever Hebrew poetry uses repetition instead of adding new content, it challenges those who are reading or hearing to meditate deeply on the words. This was not a minor fight. The enemies were surrounding the leader. In other words, the psalmist emphasizes the great danger by asking us to remember that all help was cut off because there were enemies on every side. He could not hope for help from human sources. But even when it was impossible for a human to come help him, he believed what he said in his battle cry. With the help of the Lord, he could still defeat his enemies. Verse 12. They surrounded me like bees. They burned up like a fire of thorns. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. Repeating the same account 3 times is a kind of superlative, a way of communicating that whatever qualities are in view, they're the most extreme possible. Just as holy, holy, holy can be used to say the holiest imaginable. Repeating the account of enemies surrounding him 3 times here says the situation was the most threatening imaginable. It was common to compare enemies ready to overpower someone in battle to bees. An example is the Amorites, who chased Israel as bees do in Deuteronomy 1, or the Assyrians, whom the Lord called to bring judgment in battle in Isaiah 7. There is no escape possible from swarming bees, and they cannot be defeated in a battle. The only possibility is to run away. But when enemies are surrounding an army on all sides, running away is not possible. But here we read a powerful emotional high point. There may be 3 repetitions of the enemy surrounding, but those enemies did not continue to threaten like a swarm of bees. A new image is used: thorns on fire. A fire of thorns burns very hot and bright, a picture that illustrates the intensity of the enemy's attack on the leader. But thorns are not a good fuel for fire, because even though thorns burn quickly and brightly, they will not keep a fire burning, and it will soon die. This image says the enemy's attack will not succeed. Although the threat might feel intense for a moment, it will soon die out like a fire with no fuel. How did they die out quickly? That battle cry of confidence. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. These 3 verses use a rhythm that alternates between expressing a threat and expressing confidence in God's help. Verse 10 expresses the threat, the enemy's surrounding, and then expresses confidence with the battle cry. Verse 11 expresses the threat again, followed by the confident battle cry again. And then verse 12 is an emotional high point, repeating the threat, then stating that the threat will not succeed, and finally concluding with the 3rd repetition of the confident battle cry. This provides a picture of the leader's own internal struggle as he moves back and forth between distress at the threat of enemies and confidence that the Lord will help him. With the 3rd round, the threat is defeated, and God proves he deserved the leader's confidence. Verse 13. You pushed me down hard so that I was falling, but the Lord helped me. Verse 13 begins a new description of the distressing situation and provides another perspective. This time, the psalmist speaks to the enemy directly, as if the enemy were a single person. Based on verses 17 and 18, we could imagine the author is speaking to death, as if death were a person and an enemy. The leader recognizes that human enemies are not the only enemies to consider in this situation. He is also fighting against his own fears and the danger of death. The battle against these enemies, human and abstract, became so intense that they threatened the leader's life and weakened his confidence. He feared he would lose everything, but the Lord helped, and he lost nothing. The history of Israel and the stories they used to understand their identity often follow the pattern we see here. An enemy threatens them, and they fear they will lose the battle. But the Lord miraculously saves them. Israel's original enemy was Egypt, and when God rescued Israel from Egypt, it became a symbol of God's promise to rescue Israel when they faced all kinds of danger. The Song of the Sea is the victory song Israel sings after God rescues them from Egypt, and it is recorded in Exodus 15. Later in history, the words of the Song of the Sea remind Israel of the pattern of their history. When the situation seems hopeless and the enemy is great, their God is infinitely greater and will save them. Verse 14, Yah is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. Everyone in Israel would know that this verse is a direct quotation from the Song of the Sea. It makes a connection between God rescuing this leader and every other time in Israel's history when God rescued them. If the leader understands what happened correctly, and it is true that God rescued him in the same way God rescued Israel from Egypt, this tells us something about the leader. The leader must be righteous because he is someone whom God protects and helps. He should not complain about suffering in this situation. He should make sure that people know about God's rescue and that all his people celebrate. This prepares for the next section of the testimony, rejoicing in the victory. verses 15 and 16. Psalm 118 began with the chorus director calling out, and the priests and the people responding with a similar call. Here, the leader himself calls on the people to respond as the group of righteous people whom God has saved. A voice of rejoicing and salvation is in the tents of the righteous. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly. The right hand of the Lord exalts. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly. Once again, there's a three-part cry, but this is a victory cry rather than a battle cry. The right hand of the Lord refers to his power. The danger was very great, and now the celebration is very great. Powerful enemies surrounded the leader, but the Lord was more powerful. The celebration must also be powerful to match the greatness of God's rescue. Verse 17, I shall not die, but I shall live and declare the deeds of Yah. This verse tells us that the leader felt he was very close to dying. He believed he would die unless the Lord rescued him. Part of remembering and celebrating the victory is accurately representing the threat that God removed. The leader did not die this time, and now he also has the confidence that in future battles he will not die either. He will continue to live. His response to being confident God will always protect him is to commit to tell others what the Lord has done. This is the response required by the covenant when God rescues righteous leaders. They must tell what happened in public so that the Israelites can worship God for being faithful to the covenant. That is precisely what this psalm is doing. Verse 18. In verse 18, the leader tells his story one more time. The first description is the most vivid. He imagines the enemies surrounding him and how he almost does not escape. The second account describes the enemy nations as a single enemy. Perhaps this enemy person he describes represents the danger of death. Here in verse 18, the third telling is shorter and comes from an entirely different perspective. Yah disciplined me hard, but he has not given me over to death. While thinking about God rescuing him, the leader is able to see that the whole situation was a test from the Lord. He sees that the Lord was teaching him a lesson, and it was a hard lesson. But the Lord was in control the entire time. The leader is probably not referring to discipline as a form of correction. He's probably referring to discipline as a form of training or teaching. Although he faced great danger, the leader did not die. As a result, he has learned that the Lord was in control the whole time. Since the Lord is always truly in control, then there really was, and there really is, no reason to fear anyone or anything, no matter how difficult the test. The enemies cannot threaten the Lord. He permits the whole situation in the first place. The testimony section of the psalm finishes with a gate entrance ceremony. This part overlaps the testimony and celebration sections of the psalm and makes a bridge from telling the story of a particular rescue to praising the God who rescues. Verse 19. Open for me the gates of righteousness. I will enter through them. I will give thanks to Yah. The leader is still speaking, but he now addresses the gatekeepers who are responsible for opening the gates at the right time and for the right people. The gates were called the gates of righteousness, and they let people enter the temple buildings. The leader asks them to open the gates so that he might enter the temple and give his public thanks to the Lord. This is the last time he uses Yah, the name for God used in the Song of the Sea. He both begins and ends his testimony with the name Yah. Verse 20. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous enter through it. The gatekeepers respond in verse 20. They confirm that this is the gate of the Lord, which means they may only open the gate as the Lord's law instructs them. That law only permits the righteous to enter. We know this leader is righteous, and therefore the gatekeepers may open the gate so he can enter the temple. At this point in the public celebration, the leader and crowd would likely literally walk through the gate together. Verse 21. The gate entrance also began the celebration part of the ceremony, so now we see the celebration part of the psalm. I thank you, for you have answered me and become my salvation. The leader has entered the temple buildings, and he now speaks to the Lord directly for the first time. He uses a more intimate tone because he was now in the temple where the Lord is present. Again, he quotes from the Song of the Sea, remembering that he is speaking to the God who saved Israel from Egypt and has shown the same power and loyalty by saving him. Verse 22. The crowd once again has a turn to speak. The stone that the builders rejected has become the top of the corner. This is one of the most well-known parts of the psalm. The crowd marvels at the sudden exaltation of this leader. This is probably a well-known proverb to remind people that people who are at first ignored may become important, just like a stone that is at first tossed to the side as useless by the builders, but can sometimes be rescued and used as the specially shaped stone that holds everything in place. God rescued their leader, and now the people are honoring him. The leader who was nearly defeated is now in a very visible position of victory. For a discussion of the exact wording of our interpretation of this verse, see our exegetical issues video. Verse 23. This has been from the Lord. It is extraordinary in our eyes. The victory they celebrate is not a common occurrence. The battle was intense and important, and they did not expect to win. Such victories can only come from the Lord, and the crowd must joyfully celebrate that God rescued them with a miracle. Verse 24. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice in it. The Psalms often give explicit commands to be glad and rejoice. The leader's response to God saving him is to go to the temple, give thanks, and give a testimony about what the Lord has done in front of the people gathered to worship. The assembly's response to hearing this testimony is to rejoice with the leader. The proper response is to mark the day, which refers to a special event that proves the Lord's faithfulness, and to publicly rejoice. Verse 25. The next part of the people's response is to join with the leader in trusting the Lord alone to save them when they face future tests. Please, Lord, grant salvation, please. Please, Lord, grant success, please. Though this looks like a cry for help, it is more likely expressing that they joyfully expect God's help in the future. The first line has the Hebrew words which are translated as Hosanna in the New Testament, words which are always used for rejoicing. The people celebrate the way that the leader trusted the Lord to save him and give him success, and now they commit to trusting the Lord to save them and give them success, joyfully expecting that he will answer. Verse 26. In response to both the leader and the crowd, it is now time for the priests to confirm the Lord's acceptance of the thanksgiving ceremony. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. We bless you from the house of the Lord. They first bless the leader, who is in unity with the Lord, which they express as coming in the name of the Lord. They then switch to the plural form of you to bless the crowd. The house or temple of the Lord is the source of blessing in life, and they are speaking for the Lord himself. Verse 27a. The crowd accepts the priest's blessing by declaring their covenant with God and celebrating the Lord's favor. The Lord is God, and he has made his light shine on us. The covenant promise from Israel's history is, I will be their God, and they will be my people. When the crowd says, the Lord is God, they echo this promise, confirming that the Lord is the God of Israel. The covenant continues. In the high priestly blessing we see in Numbers 6, the priest blesses Israel with the Lord's light shining on them. Here, the people declare that his light has shone on them. He has shown them his favor. Verse 27b. The climax of the Thanksgiving ceremony was the sacrifice. Inside the temple courtyard was an altar with horns on its four corners. The priests would instruct the worshippers to tie up the animal for the sacrifice and bring it towards the altar. Bind the festival sacrifice with cords, up to the horns of the altar. The priest would place the Thanksgiving sacrifice on the altar, and later they would burn part of it as a burnt offering. This would demonstrate that the Lord accepted the leader and his offering of thanks. For an explanation of our reading of this verse, see our exegetical issues video. Verse 28. The leader now closes his part of the ceremony with a final thanksgiving statement, and he also confirms the covenant. You are my God, and I shall give thanks to you. You are my God. I shall exalt you. You are my God echoes that covenant formula. I will be your God. The leader acknowledges all God has done for him by the leader being loyal to the covenant. One last time, the leader echoes the song of the sea. God exalted or lifted up the leader by saving him, and now the leader exalts God. See our Poetic Features video for more details on this connection. Verse 29. The priests have given their blessing. The crowd has accepted the blessing and affirmed the covenant. The priests have placed the sacrifice on the altar, and now the leader has affirmed the covenant as well. The people conclude the ceremony with a final thanksgiving chorus. Give thanks to the Lord because he is good, because his loyalty is forever. All those who fear the Lord sang together in verse 4, and most likely all sing together again here, the leader, crowd, and priests. At this point, the priests probably performed the sacrifice, combining the sound of voices singing about the Lord's loyalty to his people with the action of sacrifice, demonstrating the fulfillment of any vows by the one delivered and now giving thanks. When the Lord saved the leader from great distress, he kept his promise to be loyal to his people. The people, led by this leader, showed their own loyalty to worship the Lord as their God by holding a thanksgiving ceremony that included testimony, praise, and a sacrifice. This was how God and the people kept the covenant. Each side was faithful to their roles. See our Poetic Features video for a fuller picture of this covenant loyalty. We will now read Psalm 118 in its entirety. Give thanks to the Lord because he is good, because his loyalty is forever. Let Israel say, because his loyalty is forever. Let the house of Aaron say, because his loyalty is forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, because his loyalty is forever. From the tight place I cried out to Yah. Yah answered me with spaciousness. The Lord is for me. I shall not fear. What can man do to me? The Lord is for me as my helper, and I shall look in triumph upon those who hate me. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in noblemen. All nations surrounded me. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. They surrounded me. Indeed, they surrounded me. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. They surrounded me like bees. They burned up like a fire of thorns. With the name of the Lord, yes, I shall drive them away. You pushed me down hard so that I was falling. But the Lord helped me. Yah is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. A voice of rejoicing and salvation is in the tents of the righteous. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly. The right hand of the Lord exalts. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly. I shall not die, but I shall live and declare the deeds of Yah. Yah disciplined me hard, but he has not given me over to death. Open the gates of righteousness for me. I will enter through them. I will give thanks to Yah. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous enter through it. I thank you, for you have answered me and become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the top of the corner. This has been from the Lord. It is extraordinary in our eyes. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice in it. Please, Lord, grant salvation, please. Please, Lord, grant success, please. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. We bless you from the house of the Lord. The Lord is God, and he has made his light shine on us. Bind the festival sacrifice with cords up to the horns of the altar. You are my God, and I shall give thanks to you. You are my God, I shall exalt you. Give thanks to the Lord, because he is good, because his loyalty is forever. This has been the overview video for Psalm 118, in which we provide a single coherent interpretation of the psalm. See our exegetical issues video for other scholarly interpretations, and our poetic features video for details on the specifically Hebrew nature of the psalm. Go to psalms.scriptura.world for more information. Thank you for watching.